Okay, welcome back to the channel. Today I want to go over the layout that I use on my ZSA Voyager keyboard. I'm going to demonstrate my layout in the Oryx configurator, which is a ZSA closed source tool. It uses QMK in the background, so you're free to download the actual code for the layout and modify it as you wish. Although I do highly recommend Oryx. It's a great configurator, a very easy way to get started with the programmable keyboard from ZSA. And it's really is great. There are some limitations to it, but I think you won't not hit those limitations if you're just getting started. So the reason this is a fairly small layout. So I come from a small 34 key keyboard called ZSA Sweep, and as I say, sorry, Ferris Sweep. That's why I kind of tagged as combos, because I use combos. I mostly use 34 keys. It's optimized for programming, or at least from my point of view, and it's a little bit macOS centric, although shortcuts are shortcuts, so they should work anywhere, really. I've got 6 layers. I'll go over those layers one by one, and I've mentioned some of the features of Oryx or QMK as we go along. And yeah, so let's get going. So the reason why I said 34 keys is my original layout only covers these keys, so 3 by 5 and thumb cluster on both sides. So the top row and the edge columns are not used. I don't really use them. Even now, I've programmed these keys on my keyboard, but I don't use them. They're more of a convenience. I mean, quick access to single quote, double quote, underscore, hyphen, backslash, and pipe, and plus, minus, and numbers. But I've got these shortcuts remembered on another layer, which I'll go over in a minute. So starting with this layer, the letters are not important. I use Colmac layout, but QWERTY, whatever you want to use. It's not really important in this demo. Use whatever you want. These special keys here, they call home row modifiers. So your home row position is on T and N, and on your QWERTY, I believe, will be J and K, or whatever it is. I can't remember now. You can find it by these little nubbins. There's a little nub on a key normally. That kind of indicates where your index finger should rest. But I digress. So these home modifiers, essentially how they behave is that if I click on it, it says, so when I tap the key, it sends the letter A. If I hold it, it's a left command or super or Windows key equivalent. Then this key is R or left option or alt, then this is control or S, and this is T or shift, and this is mirrored on the other side. Now this little key on the edge, on the innermost column, G and M, is called hyper, and hyper essentially holds all 4 keys down. So emulates holding down meta, super, Windows key, alt, control, and shift. And this is a weird one, because normally you wouldn't try to achieve that kind of shortcut on a standard keyboard, but in terms of keyboard shortcuts, this is a very useful key. Reason being is that you're very unlikely to have already a keyboard shortcut on your system that's going to clash with hyper. So I've got various shortcuts set up that control my windows or launch specific applications that I use hyper for. For example, if I do hyper and navigation arrow left, right, up, down, it's going to move this window accordingly, and then it's going to also toggle between layers, between sizes. So it's very useful to program your own shortcuts for specific things. I highly recommend Hyperkey. Some people also use MEH key, MEH, which I believe is Windows Control Shift or Windows Option Shift. I can't remember what the combination is, but anyway, we can find out. So if we do this one, for example, and we change it to MEH. What's MEH? Alt Shift Control. Okay, so that's your answer. Alt Shift Control. So leave that alone. So this is the only special thing I've got on this main layer. This is my default layer. When the keyboard starts, that's what the layer is. And these keys, I've got backspace on the left, because I'm trying to use the analogy of backspace moves the cursor to the left, space moves the cursor to the right, and tab and return or enter. Now, the way I switch between layers is through hold. So if I hold this key, it's going to switch me to, there's an indicator here on the keyboard, switch me to layer 1. So let's go to layer 1, and vice versa. This one switch me to layer 2, tab, it's going to switch me to layer 3, and return to layer 4. So if I go to layer 1, that's my navigation layer. So when you see this kind of grayed out key in Oryx, what it means is that if you haven't reprogrammed that key on another layer, there's going to be transparent key. So what it means is that it's going to behave the same way from the layer that is below it. So in this case, the layer below it is main, and these keys have these functions. So they retain this function from the main layer because I don't use them on this layer anyway, so I left them. If you don't want to use the key, if you specifically want to disable a key, you have to select it and make sure that it's set up as none, so it doesn't actually work, doesn't actually do anything. Otherwise, the default is if you don't reprogram it on another layer, it's going to return a function of the layer that's below it. Right. So this is my navigation layer, and the way I see it is that I write with my right hand, so that's my dominant hand. So I don't mind holding a button or a key with my left hand, and I'm navigating here. So on my right hand side, I've got useful arrow keys. Very useful navigating around pages or scrolling or moving around. Some people like Vim style bindings, the HJKL. I never got on it, so I prefer arrows. And kind of naturally moving to the home position on the left and to the right. I've got escape key here, delete, page up and down. So I can do page up and down here, or control page up and down to switch between tabs. And I've got shortcuts here, so undo, which is the macOS equivalent, so shift, sorry, it's meta or super key and Z, copy super C, paste super V, got super X, and this is redo, so command shift Z. Also will be equally easy to achieve shortcuts on here, but control C will be holding S or E and typing C or V or Z or D or whatever. So this is my right hand side. On the left hand side, I've got kind of easy, quick shortcuts. Like for example, these two. When I hold this layer, then I can switch between tabs in the browser using control page up and down. And you index and you ring fingers out, the kind of strongest fingers after your thumb, so kind of easy to get around here. I've got another escape just for convenience, and then what I tend to do is I program hard kind of control keys on each layer. So if I hold this layer 1, then these keys, which were the home row mods on layer 0, are now just straight up control keys. So meta, option, control, shift, and hyper. And this hyper here, OSM, it's a one-shot modifier. So essentially what it means is I can tap it, I can just literally tap it, and it will combine it with the next key. So for example, if I want to shift this window left to right, I would hold this, press hyper, and then left and right. But what I can do as well, I can do control tap and then right, control shift and then right, and it will retain that modifier for one key press. So that's what they call a one-shot modifier, because it just remembers. You can also stack them. So you can imagine you could stack these 4, change them to one-shot modifiers and hit this one, this one, this one, this one, and then, for example, arrow and trigger a shortcut, so they can stack. They remember it. Now, as you can see, I've got them here. So left command, one-shot modifier, right alt, option, one-shot, OSM, control and shift. So I've made them kind of straight up here when you hold them, and these ones were one-shot modifiers. Sometimes they come in useful, sometimes I just want to do some weird shortcut, something I just want to do, activate this. So that's my one layer. Then these keys are fairly useful. So this caps word key is a special feature of QMK that activates caps lock just for one kind of word. So as you're typing in, it's going to excuse me, sneezed. It's going to activate caps lock just for one word. So if I hold it and then tap this key, I start typing. So, for example, this is a layer, right? So this activated caps lock is still active for that one thing. If I press space and start typing, it goes back to lowercase. So this is very useful because for the most part, we almost never activate caps lock for multiple words, especially in programming. You try and type in the name of a constant, you activate caps lock and for one thing, and it ignores things like underscores and hyphens, I believe. So no, hyphens are not, but underscores are ignored. So it's very useful for those kind of things, where you've just want to type out a single variable name or just single word in caps, and it's going to deactivate it afterwards. And I've got on this thumb key, I've got just caps lock. If you just want to activate it, it's going to activate caps lock. Then moving on, so if I then hold, again release this and go to layer 2, holding space, that's my symbols. So what I try to do, my kind of convention is that whichever hand I'm holding, activating the layer with, that hand also has access to modifiers. So if I hold number 2, and then I've got similarly hyper, also modifier, shift, control, option, meta. I've got escape here for convenience, and then I've got my brackets. So my curly bracket braces, my square braces, kind of quick to type out here, like so. And I've got my normal braces, parentheses on a cluster. Most editors these days, to start typing out the first one, it was going to autocomplete the closing one. And I got my shortcuts. So the convention I've used here is to kind of think of these shortcuts in threes. So think of it as a numpad. So they mirror what's kind of appears on a normal keyboard. So that would be equivalent of shift 1, and shift 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And then I've got my, I believe, 0 and the other equal symbol. And then obviously these two also work for when they shifted. So if you hold shift on this side and do the hyphen, then you'll get underscore, and in this case you'll get a plus. And I've got my backslash here, my tilde, my single quote. Again, if you shift that will be double quote, and my backtick. And as you can see, also these grayed out most outer column, the edge columns and top row is grayed out because it's transparent, or it goes all the way to the main layer. So that's it, fairly simple. Then if we go to layer 3, which activate with tab key by holding this, that's my function layer, and this is my number pad and my function layer. So similarly to my symbols, I number, kind of think of these F keys as, start from the bottom, kind of 1 to 3, so from inside to the outside, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 9, and then 10, 11, 12 going up. Escape, unused key, and I've got control one-shot modifier here. The reason I've got that, I'm trying to think why I've got that. Sometimes there are shortcuts, I believe like control F5, for example, that triggers something in VS Code that I use sporadically. So I've put it there, not really that use that much, but I've got it there. Similarly, on this side, I've got a left option, one-shot modifier. And this is my numpad. So this is how I type my numbers. I hold my tab key, and I type in my numbers, and again, kind of thinking of it to make it look like a numpad. 1 to 3, say 0, then minus, plus, times, divide, and everything else is just default transparent all the way to the main layer. Now my mouse layer is by holding the return key. So this is a mouse / media / kind of system control of the keyboard. A bit of a special one here. So if I hold this, if we go to the right hand side first, I've got my modifiers, one-shot modifiers again. Sometimes they come in handy. I try to remember that they're available there, but for the most part I don't. So like if I want to do control click or shift click or whatever, I can do that. I've got my volume on the home row, so decrease, increase, mute, and then play, pause, next track, previous track for controlling media. Reset resets the keyboard to a bootloader, so if you want to flash it, you can do that with a key, but although there's a physical hardware key somewhere on the keyboard here, I think here. But you can do that from the keyboard. That's a key that you can program. Now on the cluster, I've got system request, which is print screen. So it's called the actual key on the keyboard, and that will trigger a screenshot tool. In my case, you have to program it to do that. It's not a default key in macOS, I believe. So I have to set it up in the system to use that key, which I believe macOS detects as F13. So that's something for you. And Command Escape is actually Linux shortcut that I've carried over from my Linux machine, which locks the machine. Again, I've got it programmed in Mac to lock the screen. Just a little combo. And in here, this is the mouse layer. So this mimics the mouse movements. If I hold this, I can demonstrate this. So it moves a little bit. You can hold it. The longer you hold it, it kind of speeds it up a little bit, accelerates to within the limit, and then you can move it. So it's not super precise, but allows you to kind of navigate quite easily. And this is left click, right click, middle click, and then obviously scroll up and down here, and then control up and down on the wheel. That just, I believe that scrolls by page. So if you're doing scrolling a website, it will just shift by the whole page size. Again, reset on the other side, just kind of mimic this key here. And these are the RGB controls on Voyager. So that switches that says the color to purple, the color I like. This toggles the lighting on and off, and this changes the animation. So I've got a few animations set up here, but not that many. I mean, if we go to settings and RGB, I've got up and down gradient, I've got out in gradient and reactive simple. So that's kind of activates the key backlight for a fraction of a second as you type. So that's the mouse key. And now basic layer, it's interesting. So basic layer, and I like to use my keyboard whenever I can. So even if I'm gaming or doing something, I like to still use this keyboard. I don't like switching to a standard keyboard because pain in the backside to have all this hardware on your desk. So what I tend to do is, I've noticed that when you've got home run modifiers, they interfere with gaming, because obviously if you're holding a key, you don't want it to activate the modifier, etc. So I've got a basic layer which strips out all the kind of special home run modifiers or whatever, and just maintains the basic keys from the main layer. So backspace, space, return, tab, alphanumerics, and these are transparent. And how I get to this layer is through combos. So in here, there's a key here called combos. If you click that, I've got a number of them set up just to kind of navigate. So essentially combos are if you press more than one key at the same time. So my basic layer activation is if I hit the tab and return at the same time. So if I hit tab and return at the same time, it's going to drop me into layer 5. I don't have to hold it. I'll just be there in the basic layer. If I hit it again, it takes me back to the main layer. Okay. My hyphen is my PNL. So I tap that together, it creates a hyphen, underscore D and H, kind of trying to mimic, say, up and down, up and down. Escape is FNU. It's ironic that it's lined up like that, but easy to remember, FU. Escape. My curly bracket, left bracket. So FMP on the left hand side, again, trying to mimic that. If you remember from my symbols layer, my L and U keys were my curly braces, opening, closed, and H and comma were my square brackets. So I try to keep them. The top is curly, bottom is square. So FMP, curly left, curly right, L and U, square CD, and square H thing. And the main layer again activates main layer if I tap it. So that's kind of to undo the basic layer. So I've got a combo that activates it and deactivates it, so to speak. So that's my combos. What else? I mean, there's an advanced view here in Oryx that you can switch to that just shows you some extra information. I don't know what this little D is. Simple view is good enough. Other bits that I've got set up in Oryx that kind of make this home remote thing usable, that I would personally recommend. This is why I arrived at after, weeks and months of testing and figuring out what works for me. So some of the options that I've modified. So as you can see, Auto shift, I have a modifier. So any setting that you modified in Oryx in these sections is going to create a little dot next to it. So I haven't modified anything here, but just for the sake of argument, where is tapping? That's it. So my tapping term, so how quickly the keyboard differentiates between tap and hold. So if you tap it for less than 200 milliseconds, that is considered a tap of the key. Anything longer than 200 milliseconds is considered a hold. So I've got this one, which is preferred tap action and tap hold tap dances. That's tap dance. Tap dance is essentially allows you to assign up to 4 different functions to a single key. We can go over that in a second, but something that I've modified here for dual function keys. So I've ignore mode tap interrupt or ignore mode tap. So you can read the description here, but essentially it makes homebrew mods usable, especially when you're rolling. So you're not accidentally activating control or shift or modifier keys. And permissive hold, so if you press and release a dual function key, for example, shift when held and A when tapped, and a regular key within the tapping term, so less than 200 milliseconds, it would send just the tapped key normally. But enable this to ensure that it sends the hold version. So I prefer, so if, for example, I often do a control L, so I don't want it to, and I do it fast, so I do this. I want it to activate control L. I don't want to type L and L. I would normally, if I'm typing, I'm deliberate. I press and release. I don't tend to roll and hold characters, so this works for me. But experiment with these features, with these options, and try to find what works for you. Again, one shot, modifiers, holding. So going back to tap dance. Tap dance is an interesting feature because it's a little bit different to tap and hold. Tap and hold only has two kind of options. You either tapping a key or you're holding it. Well, let's say this B. We can say we can set it up when it's tapped is B, when it's held is C, when it's double tapped is D, when it's tapped and held is E, for example. Right. So this actually gives you 4 different options for the single key. So tap, hold, double tap, and tap and then hold. So it makes this very, very powerful. By default, I believe Voyager can support up to 32 layers, maybe more, maybe 64 layers. I think the limit in QMK is 64, but it would be madness to have this amount of layers on a keyboard. But again, there's lots of options here. It's very easy to create a new layer. You can just click on here, new layer, or you can browse templates. So you can search for this. I don't know, Vim, no, NeoVim, no, maybe Photoshop, no, that's Mac OS detected. Let's say Photoshop, no. So it just kind of depends on people searching. So blank Voyager, Colmac DH, someone tagged it, Colmac, default Voyager, Uriki Voyager labels by ZSA. There's templates here that people are sharing. What else is there? There's another kind of side note to Oryx is that once you configure the layers, the layout, you can compile it. So if you click here, by the way, you don't need an account if you just want to configure your keyboard once, compile it, and that's it. If you don't want to preserve your layout, if you register for an account and log in, it's free, doesn't cost anything, there's no adverts or anything like that. You can save your layouts and it'll keep track of version control as well. So as you update the layout, it's going to create stamped versions of your layout. So once you compile it, that's a version. If I then modify it and compile it again, that's another version. It will keep the history. You can create comments as to what you've changed. So it gives you a little bit of like a very simple version control system. And you can always go back to previous version if you've messed up. So then you would click here, save to my keyboard, that would pair with your bootloader and whatever. I'll cover that in another video, but there's plenty of videos that explain how to use that. And you can add your own tags. You can download the firmware, so that's the hex files, I believe, and the source code as well, and the flashing tool. Let's explore the flashing tool. I believe now it's called. Yeah, you can flash directly through Chrome, through the special web HDI pairing, or you can download the key map application from ZSA that allows you to do that as well. It's got some other features that I'll cover in another video. So that's it really. That's a kind of quick overview of my layout, how I use it. There's plenty of layouts out there for small keyboards that you can take inspiration from. I would recommend starting somewhere simple and then building on it. So start with the main kind of navigation symbols layer, for example. Although you can achieve the main and symbols here on a Voyager quite easily because you've got the number row, so you can shift all of the characters, and you've got extra keys on the side, so you don't actually need it if you don't want to. You could just shift and tap the number and just go from there. There's plenty of features. I mean, every key can just be assigned to a huge buttloads of different options. If I modify this layout again and click on here, held, let's say, actually it's just say tapped. So change, and you got obviously letters, you got your digits, you got your characters, space, hypermare, etc. Also modifiers, shift punctuation, and that's controlling the various aspects of the lighting of the keyboard. Different ways of switching to layers. So one shot layer when you're essentially switching to another layer just for one shot, for one key press. Toggle layer when you have to toggle in and out of it. Direct switch, and you've got toggle, tap toggle. So if you hold the key down, the layer becomes active, and when it deactivates, you let go. So it's kind of like what I use here. You can have keys that disable combos if you accidentally triggering them, you don't want to use them. The F keys. So as you can see, F14, for example, decreases screen brightness. 15 increases screen brightness in macOS. You've got your firmware stuff, so like resetting the EEPROM or toggling Nokia rollover. So if you need to hold down more than 6 keys, you can enable that. Sometimes it messes up with BIOS and computer's booting, so I would ignore that for now. That resets the firmware to the bootloader. You can essentially switch the tapping time, which is how quickly the keyboard interprets tap versus hold behavior on the fly. You've got different languages. I haven't explored this. I believe this is maybe which is the kind of language of the keyboard. I'm not sure how it works. I'll have to explore that. For example, I've got British and US, so when I'm using my Mac, put out the keyboard, then it's set to British because it's a British layout. But for my custom keyboards, I always use a US layout because I know where I stand, and on most systems, especially when you're SSHing to servers, chances are the layout is going to be set to US locale. You've got media control, eject, fast forward, etc. There's loads, and you go back and forward on Windows. So they've got some very specific things. Acceleration you can change of the mouse. The default one worked fine for me. Navigation. All the keys they could possibly imagine are here. And I don't know what this is. This looks like typing currency, maybe. Other ones, Space Cadet, Caps Word, copy, some very useful shortcuts, none, it just disables the key. System control again, brightness, macOS specific stuff, do not disturb, dictation, etc. Power, sleep, spotlight, wake. And you also have macros. So macros are very useful if you want to type something out. Obviously, I would not recommend storing things that are sensitive in nature, like your passwords or your name, because they could be easily pulled out from the firmware if someone gets hold of that. So don't do that. I do have macros. So something that is one of the limitations I come across with Oryx that I can achieve in code with QMK is a next sentence macro. So I had a macro on my other keyboards, which are straight up QMK, where if I typed in the space twice quickly, it would put a full stop, space, and it would capitalize the very next letter. So it would activate the one-shot modifier for shift. So that's akin to something like on when you type in on Android phone, I believe on iPhone as well. If you double space, is going to put a full stop space and then capitalize the next letter because you're starting the next sentence. So that's a tiny little macro that I used in the past. Another macro that I've used in the past was in my QMK keyboards. I used a tap dance feature. So essentially, when I tap this key, it activates caps word. If I double tap it, it activates caps lock, just to save a key. But actually, I wasn't using this key, so I split them into individual keys because it just makes more sense. I wasn't using this key anyway, so I might as well just separate these functions and then it's clear what's happening. Right, so I think that's it for now. Hope that was a little, hopefully it was useful to you to see what's possible in Oryx. I might go into some specific features of Oryx in future videos, but for now, I just wanted to give you a little overview of how I use Voyager with Oryx, what my layout looks like. Hopefully you got some interesting ideas from my layout. Maybe you can borrow some aspects of how I organized things, how I think about using the keyboard. And this is kind of optimized for me, for my comfort level. I remember my shortcuts, I know how to type, touch type. I don't have to use these, the function row, the number row, or the external column. But I've got it. If I wanted to program some useful macros, for example, for games or specific programs, you could do that. You could utilize the keys to do anything you want. Anyway, guys, thanks for that. And if you find it interesting or useful, then give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, consider subscribing if you can. And till the next video. Cheers.